First, I'd like to introduce Kim McCoy-Wade. Kim McCoy-Wade currently serves as Senior Advisor on Aging, Disability, and Alzheimer's in the Office of Governor Gavin Newsom. Kim previously served as the Director of the California Department of Aging, where she led the governor's master plan for aging, as well as the COVID-19 response and expansions in home and community care for older and disabled adults and families. Kim has also served at the California Department of Social Services as the CalFresh and Nutrition Branch Chief, where she implemented new CalFresh food benefits for older adults and people with disabilities and led several data and technology initiatives like the Get CalFresh mobile application. Before entering state service, Kim consulted for multiple health and human services nonprofits and led the California Association of Food Banks. Earlier in her career, she worked in Washington, D.C. for the Children's Defense Fund and other national organizations. Kim is a proud alumna of the New York School of Law, Carleton College, and the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and currently resides right here in Davis with her family. So Kim, thank you for being here today, and I'd like to welcome you to the stage.
Thank you so much for coming back in. It's hard to leave those student presentations, posters even for me. I'm delighted to be here. Secretary Ross asked me to come, and not only was I delighted to come back to my roots as a food person, but to double head with the other Wade in the administration is great, Secretary Crowfoot. So you get a double dose of the Wades today. So I'm also glad to be with folks who think about the future and use data and listen to communities, because I want to talk about what's happening in food, and from where I sit, feel like food is going through its own climate change right now. So let's just start with what you all already know, that food is many things, right? Food is nutrients, but food is also culture, food is connection, food is health, food is agriculture, food is big business. Food is lots of things. And what I want to focus on today is, yes, the nutrition and the poverty pieces, but also the connection pieces, that food is a community builder. I kind of want to talk about all the changes that are happening right now. And I'm going to do it from the lens of older adults, because the reason the governor has the only advisor in the nation on aging is because, do you know that we're about to have more people over 60 than under 18 for the first time ever and forever? So you may have seen the news yesterday that more people are coming back to California, so our population's going up. But actually what's really going on is more people are living longer. We're coming out of the COVID terrible tragedy, and we have more people over 60 than under 18 about to cross that threshold, and our fastest growing age group, 80 to 100. So all of you in this room should be planning for a 100-year life. Thinking about your parents, your grandparents, your children, your grandchildren, where you're going to work, who you're going to care for, who's going to care for you. So I think a lot about the 100-year life, the 5-generation family, and food, and how food fits in. And so I'm just going to start with one story, and then I'm going to talk about the big changes I see. So when I came to California in 2000, there was a big thing happening in food stamps then, now SNAP. I thought I brought it with me, but I can't find it. It's the EBT card. That's a 20-year innovation. And when I first came here, the first thing I worked on was, are Californians, are poor Californians ready for a card? Can they handle it? And we went back and forth, and we decided we're going to give counties the choice, because we're not sure everybody can use a card. And so Fresno County decided, no, our people definitely couldn't use a card for food stamps. We got to keep it the paper check once a month. And then right away, once we launched, guess what? Everybody can use a card. But I believe WIC is still not on a card, right? WIC is still a paper check. So we're trying to get WIC to a card. No? It's a card? Okay, good. There's it's a card in California. We have a budget issue we're working through, and I'm not understanding what it's about, so maybe I'll ask you afterwards. So we got WIC onto a card. So that's one of the changes that, 20 years ago, that was seen as futuristic, unimaginable. So let me ask you this. Seniors and food, what's the first program that pops to mind? Meals on Wheels. That is what America thinks about, if they think about older adults and hunger, is Meals on Wheels. And that's both wonderful and also a bit of a challenge. Let me tell you why. I'm gonna talk about the people, the payer, and the meals, and then I'm gonna leave you with some tough questions to help us figure out. So older adults, I've already told you there's more of us and them than ever before. Guess what? They're still majority white in California, the only age group that's still majority white, but that is about to change, and that's changing very quickly. Many are not married, never married, divorced, LGBTQ. Many don't have kids at all or kids nearby. So older adults are not who you think they were. And in fact, 3-year-olds are more alike each other than 70-year-olds are like each other because of life. And when it comes to equity, you're at the end of your life, a lifetime of inequity has compounded. So let's think about who's 75 now. People born in 1950 in America. Women couldn't have credit cards. Black people had inferior, well, sometimes better, but segregated schools. I come from Virginia, and there's some mighty proud schools in Virginia that were segregated, but segregated schools, no gay marriage. So huge arrest cohorts of black men in the 80s and 90s. They're 75. So their aging experience, they don't have a pension, Social Security, a wife, and a house with 2 cars. So we've got huge inequities. And I was so thrilled. California has a brand new racial equity commission that just met down in Fresno, and guess who showed up? Dolores Huerta came and said, I'm here because aging is a racial equity issue. So we are really moving on aging with equity at its center. So that community is different, and that relates to what they want from food. Our Meals on Wheels on Orange County is transitioning to local Vietnamese meals because Vietnamese elders would like to eat local Vietnamese food that is cooked in their community. And as you may have seen in the pandemic, the governor experimented with something called Great Plates, where we actually bought the meals from local restaurants. I'm a little embarrassed to say how many Meals on Wheels programs basically serve airplane food, right? So when the pandemic happened, they couldn't get their frozen meals flown across the country. We have kind of made progress on school meals, the first partner signature farm to school part, but do you hear about farm to assisted living, farm to nursing home, farm to senior centers, farm to Meals on Wheels? Not yet. So we have a lot to do, and as they should, people's expectations are rising. So first of all, know your people. Who are you serving? Listen to them. How have they changed? Challenge your assumptions. Second, in our world, who pays for this is super, super duper changing. And you know what? I already know you know this because I saw a poster on this very subject. It's very exciting. Well, before I even get there, food prices. As long as I've been working on food, it's been a fundamental that food is cheap in America. Food is cheap in America and may not be great quality, but that's what we do to keep food prices down, and that helps when you talk to low-income people. Housing is what's getting them, healthcare is what's getting them, childcare is probably out of reach, but food is the cheapest thing, and they make, again, buy for calories, buy for density, but it's gettable in a way that housing, for example, is hard. That's not true right now. Food prices are up, and when you talk to people about basic need income, the number one thing they do is they eat more. And by more, I mean a second or third meal in the day, not like overeat. The elder who just has that one meal at 3 o'clock has a second one. So food is the most price sensitive as well. It's where you cut first, right? You don't skip your rent, you skip that meal, you go to oatmeal, you go to ramen, you go down. So the food price issue is a huge issue, even as we solve for worker quality, food quality, local, we have to keep that price sensitivity in mind. All right, so food stamps. By far, in California, it's known as CalFresh because we name everything ourselves. Until 2018, older adults couldn't get. We were the only state in the country where older adults couldn't get it. Why? Because we said they don't want to go to the welfare office. They get Social Security and Medicare from the feds. Let's just give them $10 more in their check so they don't have to deal with the welfare office. Fast forward 50 years, $10 ain't so much for food, and if they'd been getting food stamps, they'd be able to get up to about $100 a month. So through a very wonderful political grassroots policy under Governor Brown, we're able to unwind a 1972 policy decision, which, believe you me, is hard, and bring in those older adults. And we now have nearly 1 million older adults every month get $100 on a card to buy food. So that is the major funder, 100% paid for by the feds, except where the state pays for undocumented, and we're moving towards an expansion to undocumented older adults as quickly as we can. So I told you there's 1 million older adults getting food stamps in California. How many would you say, and this is not a test, but just to keep us on our toes, how many do you think get Meals on Wheels? 50,000. Okay. It's hard to deliver a meal to a house. About another 150 are getting a meal at a senior center, but that's a little bit, that's being shook up by COVID, where those were all closed. So that is a really interesting piece, that is been a hard program to scale, and I'll talk about that in a second. But that older adult, Meals on Wheels, older adults are special, are different, they eat different, they consume different, is still an important source of money. But the newest one is food as medicine, food as health. California is leading the country in transforming our Medi-Cal program, where I think you guys probably know 1 in 3 Californians access health insurance through Medi-Cal. And Medi-Cal, we're now saying, you know what keeps you healthy? Community services. Staying out of the doctor's office helps you stay healthy. And one of those 13 services we just turned on is medically supportive meals. And of those 13 services, that is the number one, more than housing, respite, home modification, a personal care worker. So I just looked it up, though, and the last quarter we have data, 30,000 people got a medically nutritious meal. So you see where I'm going. We've got 1 million getting food stamps every month. We've got 50,000 getting a meal on wheel, and we've got 30,000 who got a medically nutritious meal. And by the way, there's 9 million people over 60 in California right now. So just a sense of how these things fit together. So that's the payer piece. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, how do we eat? How do we eat? And we could all probably talk about how that's changed over the years, right? Even with CalFresh and food stamps, when we started, you couldn't order online. Ordering groceries online, my goodness, that's really, now you can. You couldn't have those groceries delivered. You can, although you have to use your non-CalFresh money to pay for the delivery fee if there is one, but if you buy more than $50, you can usually get free delivery. Hot food, still not allowed in CalFresh. You want to get a rotisserie chicken? No can do. You want to get a raw chicken? Sure. This goes to our stereotypes about low-income people and how they should be spending their time. But for older adults, we're looking at, like, and for lots of folks, how can we make sure that as the food system is changing, poor people who are in poverty's food system gets to change too. They get to order online for the same reasons. They have delivery for the same reasons. And, you know, rotisserie chicken helps all of us get dinner on the table. So that's one of the things we're looking at. At the same time, grab and go is a huge thing now for older adults, because guess what? They're still working. They're still driving into their 80s. They want to grab and go and pick up that free meal. But what's lost with the traditional programs like Meals on Wheels is connection. So you see Meals on Wheels saying, you know what? We don't just want to get paid for the meal, we want to get paid for the wellness check, for the visit, for the isolation check, and counting that too. So that is all changing. And frankly, our senior centers need to change too. I don't know if anybody here has been to one, if anybody here is looking forward to going to one, but they have been, they kind of have been ignored. And so there's some real opportunity to say, if that's a place where food and connection happen, well, let's make them someplace we all want to be. So that was my short pitch to you, that everything is changing, that we know nothing, and we need your help to figure out where to from here. And I'm going to leave you with 2 challenges that I was recently exposed to, kind of from a Colombia, the country of Colombia example, and the country of Zimbabwe example, and see if that makes sense for us. So something they're doing in Colombia is creating care blocks. Care blocks. In America, we do a terrific job of age segregation. We say, oh, you're old, leave work, and if you could, leave our neighborhood and move into this other place over there. That's particularly the dominant white culture. A lot of immigrant cultures say, stay here, come into the family, let's have a multi-generational house, let's put that ADU up, let's triple up. So we've got different housing and patterns, but traditionally older adults are sort of supposed to go away. That can't really work if it's a third of your life, a quarter of your life, so much to contribute. So what they're doing is saying, instead of moving to the assisted living all the way across town, what if we put small homes, 3 or 4 in an area, and then connected those folks so the meals came from the community, visits came from the community, volunteering happened in the community. And so we're looking, like I said, I live in Davis over by the Trader Joe's, and there's a lot of big scale assisted living and nursing homes in that area. There's also a lot of older people aging in place in a too big house that doesn't suit them as they age. But they don't want to leave their neighborhood, and they don't want to go into that big assisted living, and that's lots of valid reasons for that. What if there was a duplex or a triplex down the street that they could go in, and there were 6 or 7 of those, and again, instead of having airplane meals dropped in, there was cooks who could bring meals to those neighborhood houses. So what does care blocks mean? What does care blocks look like? How are we realistic about people's needs for community food care? We don't know. We don't know. Right now, we're not building communities and food systems with the aging lens. The second idea is really about isolation and loneliness. Zimbabwe has started a program, kind of the friendship bench. Basically, benches that are different color that volunteers are tied to, where you kind of go if you want to talk to somebody, to try to break through the segregation and the loneliness. And I have been thinking a lot about all the ways we bring children together and that we don't bring older adults together. So what if at school meals, instead of revitalizing senior centers, we said, why don't we have school meals and elder meals together? Obviously, you have to do background checks, et cetera, and all those good things. And you can't just throw people together with different ages and hope for the best. There's some support that needs to be there. But food does bring us together. And it's just increasingly, as it makes sense to me, why the kids are over here and the older adults are over here. And remember, in California, our school population is dropping. So we're gonna have to start repurposing schools if we're gonna keep those buildings. Terrific, we have a great community center that has exercise space and learning space and library space and art space. What if that became the school, the Lifetime Learning Center, the Intergenerational Eating Center? What can we do about that? Our libraries now offer summer meals to kids. What if they were for everybody? And so I would just urge you to kind of push against all discrimination, all segregation in your community planning, in your food planning, your system planning. And how can food does bring us together across culture and across age. And there's so much to learn from our elders about cooking and history and culture and tradition. How can we build societies that make sure we all have enough food, but also we get the most we can out of food to build communities for all. All right, I'll leave you with those questions, and thank you so much for the chance to be with you.
Thank you, Kim. That was really good. Thank you. I'd like to now introduce Wade Crowfoot. Wade Crowfoot has served as California's Natural Resources Secretary since 2019, where he leads efforts to conserve California's environment and natural resources. Secretary Crowfoot leads an agency spread across 26 departments, I feel for you, commissions and conservancies. His agency is charged with stewarding California's forests and natural lands, rivers and water supplies, and coastal areas and ocean waters. It also protects natural places, wildlife, and biodiversity, and helps oversee the state's world-leading clean energy transition. Secretary Crowfoot oversees billions of dollars of public investment to protect people and natural places from climate change impacts and has led efforts to navigate California's record-breaking droughts, floods, and wildfires. He has been on the front lines of environmental leadership throughout his career, which has included serving in Governor Jerry Brown's administration, leading the nonprofit Water Foundation, and as West Coast Regional Director for the Environmental Defense Fund. Wade grew up in Michigan and moved to California in the mid-1990s, where he discovered backcountry camping with friends. He says his best days as Natural Resources Secretary are spent outdoor with local groups that are conserving land and connecting people to nature. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Wade Crowfoot to the stage.
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. And I have to say, California is an incredible place to live. And it's also a wonderful place to work, whether you're in government or in university. And it was so fun to hear my colleague Kim talk about her work. We spent a lot of time in the governor's cabinet together, but we never get to hear about each other's work. So, and Kim's work is a great example of the innovation that's happening 10 miles away. And it's why, your college, your university is so important. UC Davis is positioned geographically, but also intellectually as sort of the key intellectual partner to state government. And, I'm really excited to talk a little bit about our natural resources management, which is an area I think we're innovating a lot in, but whether it's aging, whether it's corrections reform or justice reform or education, or technology. I mean, in every area, we're really breaking new ground. And I'm thankful to the work that you and your colleagues do, whether you're grad students or professional researchers or teachers. We're very thankful for the work that you do. So this morning, I understand you talked about air and water and unpacked a lot of the challenges that can feel really daunting in California and across the world. A lot of us spend a lot of time, what I'll call doom scrolling, where we check out the most recent catastrophic news or science on the state of climate change or biodiversity loss. And that's really discouraging and a bit of a wake-up call. I mean, clearly we live at a consequential time to be working in the areas that we all care about. Absolutely. I think this is a pivotal moment. And being in California, I think, is this tremendous opportunity to lead the world tackling and ultimately, confronting and then effectively addressing these challenges. So what do I mean by that? I want to give you 3 examples of things that happened last week, and this is going to be the crux of the talk. And they're all examples of how California is leading the way, tackling some of these wicked problems, and how academic and governmental partnerships can actually help us move further faster. So last week, we were very proud to launch our first ever nature-based solution targets that are related to our climate action. Now, you all know that California has among the most ambitious climate targets in the world. Over the next 2 decades, our state law says that California, the 5th largest economy in the world, is going to transition that economy to beyond fossil fuels to net zero carbon or carbon neutrality. And we not only have set that target, we have a roadmap to reach that target. Our colleagues at the Air Resources Board that you heard from this morning maintain that roadmap. It's called the scoping plan, and it's updated every 5 years. And essentially, if you think about it as an equation to achieve carbon neutrality, the different variables include how are we going to reduce pollution in transportation, in buildings, in energy generation. And those are important, but I'll tell you one missing variable until 2022 was nature. We know that our landscapes, our plants, our forests, our farms, our deserts remove carbon from the atmosphere and store that carbon, natural sequestration. This is the carbon cycle. CO2 goes into plants, gets released as oxygen. The challenge is across our world and across California, our landscapes are not healthy. And so they're a net source of emissions rather than a sink for emissions. So for the first time, the Air Resources Board said, actually, we need a target to reduce the emissions from our landscapes. And those emissions have been intense. Think catastrophic wildfire, really swamping the amount of emission gains we have from all of these other great programs. So in 2022, they set a target. And it said you can't exceed the loss of carbon stock or increase of emissions 4% below 2014 levels. Really wonky, but essentially you have to arrest this growth of emissions from our lands. What we announced last week was 81 specific targets across 8 landscapes, including farms, forests, deserts, cities, oak woodlands, savannas, around what actions need to be taken to actually achieve that target and move our landscapes towards being a sink for carbon rather than a source for carbon. And in the agricultural space, for example, it was acreage targets for healthy soils, integrating compost and organic materials on soils. It was acreage goals for the amount of farms that are brought into regenerative practices. On forest management and wildfire suppression, it was things, acreage that were reintroducing prescribed fire, which is a traditional tribal practice across California, low-level fire. So my example in terms of a point of hope in California and climate change is we think we're the first place in America, maybe the world, to have these specific landscape by landscape targets to ensure that our lands are part of our climate solutions. And I think there are numerous opportunities to partner across academics and researchers in your agency. So that's example number one. Example number two is in the southern part of the state, we closed Highway 101 in each direction for several hours of the day, each day for the last week. Now you're thinking, how is that? Why is that something you're proud of? Does anybody know? Because we are constructing the world's largest wildlife overcrossing over 10 lanes of the 101 to ultimately recover the population of threatened Southern California mountain lion. Huge habitat on one side of the 101, huge habitat on the other side of the 101, and disconnected habitat. So conservation organizations, the National Wildlife Federation, raised almost $50 million for this huge landmark project. The state chipped in a like amount, and we're building that wildlife overcrossing, and it's happening. And what's remarkable is normally Angelenos would be up in arms about the traffic impacts. But there's this amazing sort of cultural license to disrupt traffic, and everybody's just so excited that in the backyard of one of the largest cities on the planet, we are creating this link that's actually going to help recover the mountain lions. That's going to give them the genetic diversity that they need. At the same time, at the other end of the state, just yesterday, we commenced destruction of a dam. Now, you may have a better understanding of this, but normally you think, okay, that's not necessarily a point of progress. Well, it is, because it's the largest dam removal in American history. It's the largest river restoration in American history in the Klamath Basin. We're going to recover 400 miles of critical salmon habitat in what was once the third most productive salmon fishery in the Western Americas. And it's a project, it's a movement led by California tribes over the last 2.5 decades, and it's happening in California. It's part of this audacious plan we have to protect our biodiversity. California, one of 36 biodiversity hotspots in the world based on the richness of life that we have. These are two signature projects that are really, from my point of view, epitomize our ambition. We also have this ambitious target to conserve and protect a full third of our land, 30% of our land and coastal waters by 2030. You may have heard of it, called 30 by 30. And we've set a numeric target that we're held accountable for because it's a fairly short duration target. Last year, we added 1,000 square miles of protected land, all about protecting that remarkable biodiversity. And then the third example I'll share last week that we were proud of announcing is announcing $107 million to California Native American tribes for ancestral land return as part of 30 by 30. Now, you all know or should know the dark legacy of California state government's treatment of tribes that was started by our first California governor in his inaugural address, putting a bounty on the head of Native women and children. Literally state-sanctioned genocide from the founding of our republic. Fast forward almost 200 years, we represent institutions that have perpetuated that disconnection, discrimination, violence, but we're finding a new way. The governor issued a formal apology to tribes, something no other governor had done, frankly, long overdue, but that was only the start. And so across our agency, we're establishing co-management agreements to work with tribal governments to co-manage, whether it's a state park or a resource like a fishery or a forest. That's a point of progress. Ancestral land return, so important. These are people that have been caring for what we know as California for thousands of years. They have traditional ecological knowledge and practices that we are now desperate to reintegrate onto our landscapes. Think prescribed fire, cultural fire. So on Friday, we announced this $100 million plus to 33 projects. There are tribes that are getting land back for the first time since statehood. And I was forwarded on the best email I think I'll ever receive in my career, which was not to me, but to the folks that actually administered the program. And it was a tribal leader who began her email saying, "This is the best news we've received in 175 years. You don't get an email like that every day. I share that with you because we talk about climate change, we talk about biodiversity loss, but, as Kim mentioned, we have, a shameful level of inequity in California, given the affluence of our state, that we are working very, very hard to tackle. And under Governor Newsom, we have a pillar called California for All to ensure that all Californians can live safe, healthy, rewarding lives. And it means confronting where we've got it wrong. So that's these building tribal partnerships is only one area that we're focused on. And I'd invite you, along on that journey as well, because academia, has made all sorts of mistakes as well. And as we address these, what we consider environmental issues, if we don't do that don't do that in a way that's a vehicle to address inequity and reconcile and restore relationships with those that have been left behind, then we fail. So I'm really excited because we do this work in California. The challenges are daunting. We are wide-eyed on that. Our agency has to deal with the floods and the droughts and the wildfires and the extreme heat and the coastal erosion and sea level rise. We deal with that every day. But I can tell you there is no better place in the world to be tackling these issues than California. And we're going to move further and faster if we do so together. So I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to at least share how this connection is so important and invite the collaboration. Kim, myself, others who are leading these efforts need the best and brightest ideas. We need the smartest people bringing us the solutions. I tell people I have zero time to be creative. That's not my core competence. I'm moving a bunch of things forward. What we need are really smart scientists and academics, folks that will bring these ideas, data-based, scientifically driven solutions. And then our focus is how do we apply them to achieve the goals we know we need to achieve. So thank you very much and best of luck today.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. We really appreciate that. And thank you, Kim. And I know you guys have to run off, but thank you so much. Our next, I'm going to invite Chris Simmons to the stage. Chris is our chairman of the Department of Food Science and Technology, and he'll introduce the next panel.